Do a quorum? Yeah, looks like we do. Okay. Morning. I'd like to call the Executive Committee meeting for Wednesday, June 24th to order. Could I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Lear?
He's muted.
Mr. Lear?
You have that.
Present?
Present.
Mr. Washington? Mr. Hess? Mr. Tholen? Mr. Byrne?
Present.
Ms. Weber?
Present.
Mr. Payton? Mr. Kinzinger?
Present.
Ms. Haas?
Present.
Mr. Featherling?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Seroy?
Present.
Mr. Wheeler?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Alrighty, have no public comment today. Presentations, approval of minutes, May 27th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved. So moved.
Let's see, Mr. Seroy, Mrs. Haas, I believe.
Second, yeah.
Alrighty, and roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Seroy?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Alrighty, under legislative, Steve, do you have anything today that you want to share?
No, I have nothing.
Yeah, I don't either. Most of the stuff that we've already released to the board and to the public, so I don't know if there's anything new that's developed. About the next major movement would probably be veto session later in the year. Also, there a clarification on the $7 million that Senator Joyce got for us for the river initiatives. That will obviously not all be coming, a week from Tuesday. This is something that is appropriate over a longer time period, so there's no definitive date, but this committee should know that starting the conversation with the senator, introducing him to the River Commission, the Kankakee and Yellow River Basin Development Commission that I sit on in Indiana, to try to coordinate these efforts as he starts to build an overall strategic plan for how to best deploy those resources and how we all work together. So that's just a little mention because it's a follow-up on prior legislation. And it does also kind of, there's other aspects of the legislation that's in veto session regarding Hopkins Park and the natural gas pipeline, and also getting the service into the communities, something I've been working on with obviously the mayor out there and Senator Joyce and Representative Parkhurst and all the stakeholders, board member Payton, others. It's been a group effort, but there is legislation to back up the grants that we're applying for. So if we happen to get the grants, then the legislation may not be as I want to say deeply necessary. Some of it may be necessary to get the actual. It's not just good enough to bring the gas to Hopkins Park. You got to get it in the homes, and then also make it viable for people to be able to take advantage of the savings. So I thought I'd mention that under legislative. We have no appointments. Or does anyone have any questions, I guess, about that, or really anything you might have heard regarding legislation? If we don't have the answer, we'll find out. I do want to mention one thing. It is somewhat related to legislation. I just thought of it. We're working on what does Phase 4 mean to the Open Meetings Act. There's, I think there's folks that want to come back to meeting in this room. How does that jive with, the public being in the same room with 28 board members? Phase 4 is 6-foot social distancing still. How do we take care of all these different, requirements and still be able to operate? So know that we're working on that right now internally. We're going to do some measuring in here again to make sure we've got what the footprint needs to be. But in any event, if we do come back, know that we have to have a majority of a quorum in this room, which would be 15, in order to vote to let everybody else come in via Skype. That is the correct OMA procedure. We just can't do it. We have to vote to allow people to join. But then we still have the issue of the public in the back. How do we, and then having enough spots for, well, I would be one, obviously, of the 15, but how do we spread 14 people out in here within a 6-foot radius and still have a microphone and be able to do our business? So we're looking at maybe the EOC. Can we do it out there at the jail with the big room they have there? That was an idea that Wes had. I thought it was a good one. But then what do we do with the public there as well? So it's not just as easy as saying we're phase 4, let's go back to meetings. There's the size of the rooms, the buildings, the locations, all of that stuff, and then the public access all has to be brought together. And me and Anita and Wes were talking about it this morning. We're going to meet with the state's attorney's office to figure out with whatever we do, it's completely open, transparent, and allows the public to participate as best as phase 4 allows us. So with that, no appointments today. Kevin Duval, did you have anything from Information Services?
I just want to briefly state that, yes, we are on budget. We've had unusual expenses given the epidemic, but I've adjusted inside the budget. This has actually been one of the busiest times that we've had since I've been here in 20 years. With everybody going home initially, we had a lot of remote users that had to be trained. We had expenses associated with that. The courthouse has gone to remote sessions, and that had to be in compliance with Illinois Supreme Court. So we're working on a daily basis with that. So we've had a lot of more time required out of that, but we've stayed within budget. I've just put some things off that we had planned on doing this year. In addition to the topic that Mr. Wheeler just brought up, and I've talked to the chairman about this, the only locations that we can do what you need to do to stream it is either here or at as he said, at the sheriff's place. You can't go randomly because of the requirements for the sound system. We don't have that now. I don't know that we, given the pandemic, that we would have the ability to acquire the equipment to go to a new place, and then that requires a lot of labor to set it up. And the chairman had already taken that into account. So it isn't as easy as finding a large place to have that meeting. You need this infrastructure to be able to set up this meeting, which is not an easy thing. As the chairman told you, we took weeks to do the thing at the library, and even then, that was hard to do. So it's not an easy thing to just go to some place, but the chairman was already aware of that. But I also want to assure that at this point, we are on budget. We are doing those things that we need to do. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Any questions for Kevin? Anyone? Okay, thanks, Kevin. Health Department, Mr. Beavis, I'm sure you have a few things for us today.
I do. Good morning, everyone. Just a real quick update where we're at with the COVID investigation from the contact tracing side from what we're doing here. As of yesterday, we were just at 1,241 cases. We had 6 new cases yesterday, I believe. We're at 61 deaths. I am, happy to report that our recoveries are rapidly increasing there. So we're almost at 1,000. We're at 943 recoveries. So we actually only have 200 and something active cases that we're dealing with right now. So that's positive. And then only 18 that are, I'm sorry, not 18, 8 that are hospitalized currently, unless that number changes today a little bit. Obviously, Mr. Wheeler mentioned the phase 4 guidelines are starting to come out and be released, and hopefully on Friday we're going to be transitioning into that, which is going to allow a bunch of places to open up that have not been able to do that so far. And so that all that information is getting put out. And with the help of Chairman Wheeler and the coalition and the collaboration of all those agencies that we're working on all those meetings to put that information together, that is, I believe, up on our website, and the information's getting out to everybody so that if they have questions, they can go there. I've been looking through it. It doesn't seem to answer everything. Sometimes it seems like it has more questions than answers, but it's a good start. And then obviously the state is indicating that they'll be sending out more information as they go along. It seems as unfortunately that, you know, they're trying to play catch up in a lot of this. As soon as they put something out there, then we're all asking, well, what about this? And then they're like, oh, we didn't think about that. So then they turn around and get that information. So we're scrambling to get it as quickly as we can and then get it put out as quickly as we can. And obviously it'll go out on our Facebook and then, you know, obviously out to all the other websites that are linked to ours to share that. And then with our contact tracing grant, we have submitted that. So the state hasn't yet approved it, and we've not received anything back yet from them that they need any corrections. So hopefully that's a good sign that within the next week or so, we were told that that could be approved. But that is to help us to do the contact tracing throughout the next year. It will allow us to hire some additional people, which would then free up our staff to go back to doing what they're supposed to be doing as we slowly open back up into our normal services. Now, that's not looking like it might not happen till at least the end of July. And then I will throw in there that one of the things that maybe is going to be a blessing here with the pandemic and the fact that some of us are sort of shut down still to appointments only. Our WIC program and our family case management, which is some of our largest services in terms of the day-to-day people that come in or have appointments, we're getting a new computer system from the state that starts July 1, and they're going to have to train our staff to do that, and then we have to implement it. So it looks like the WIC program is still allowing the calls instead of walk-ups, so we're calling people for their appointments. That will continue through at least the end of July now, which allows us a little bit more freedom and flexibility to do the training in-house so we don't lose too much time and effort there, and will allow a little more, I guess, less stress for the staff in worrying about what they have to do and servicing what they're going to do, because that will shut us down for about 3 days as they get trained on the new system. Because they'll have to shut down the old system as they install the new one. So it's looking like the end of July for, us slowly opening things back up and then maybe getting our staff, like the environmental health, back out to do start to do inspections again and some of our normal duties. But that grant is going to help, as I said, getting back to the grant for the contact tracing. That will help hire the staff that will do the contact tracing for us, will oversee that work. They're going to be contractual employees because it is only a 1-year grant at this point. So there's no guarantee that it's going to continue after that. It's also providing money that will help increase testing within the community. So we had reached out to the hospitals and Aunt Martha's and in regards to, letting them know that there potentially will be some money available as we determine, as schools open up or industries open up, if we start to see new outbreaks occurring in those locations, we could move some testing sites out to those places and, do a mass testing on a day, similar to what we did like in Pembroke and Sun River Terrace, and the hospitals went out and did some of the other communities like Bourbonnais and Bradley. So there's going to be money in there for that. So that's kind of where we're at right now. If there's any questions, I'll take those.
I had just a couple. Have you heard any best practices for, like testing events, drive-through, all of that for COVID in phase 4? Are they still saying keep going on that type of stuff, or is there any published direction, or is it just kind of silent right now?
In regards to like the hospitals doing the testing?
Well, yeah, now that we're in phase 4, I didn't know if there's still an impetus now to continue. I have one, obviously, because we want our numbers to be accurate and reflect our community. Are we going to see hospitals be advised that they shouldn't be doing mass testing anymore, or is now the time to ramp it up? I'm just trying to figure out if there's any direction on that.
I'm not sure, Andy, in regards to that specifically. I know that Riverside, for example, starting this past Monday, had taken down their drive-up services, but you can still walk in and get testing within the facility. So I think as it seems that is sort of going down, in terms of, the public, the demand, a big demand anyway, so that people are trickling in to get tested. Obviously, as we may get spikes in numbers, if we do that, then that could, allow for, new sites to pop up for that, which again, part of this grant could allow for that. And instead of it maybe being at the hospital, we could go out to a particular community, because maybe you see it at a community or a high school or, a situation like that. So I didn't see anything in the guidelines specifically for that. It does seem that things are starting to slow down in terms of, obviously our numbers have not been, I'm not sure what the numbers are on tests that are occurring each day, but obviously our positive cases are decreasing, and the deaths have definitely slowed down compared to what they were, a month ago even. So that's all promising, but I guess I can follow up on that and get you an answer.
Sure. My only concern is that if we start pulling back, the numerator and the denominator, it's not hard to do the math, but you start pulling back big testing opportunities, and we're only testing people who are presenting that have symptoms, and then all of a sudden our percentage goes way up because we're not testing as many people. You see my concern. That's the only reason I bring that up, because I don't want our metrics to get skewed based on a perceived relaxing of the protocol. So I appreciate that, John, and if you hear anything, let me know.
Well, and I know currently, just to follow up on that real quick, both hospitals are still doing walk-in testing. I know that there's a couple of private labs at least. I think it's Midwest Physicians and Physicians Immediate Care and Aunt Martha's are doing walk-ups. So there's still testing out there available. It's just how much is it being used right now, that I'm not sure.
Okay. Todd, did you have something? Mr. Seroy? He's muted.
Actually, I was thinking as the lines of the numbers, are they going to test all the schools when they start coming back to session? Is every school district going to start testing? And that would increase our testing numbers, which would then probably increase our positive rates. So that was my thought on the whole mass testing. If they're and that could, in September could spike numbers just because of the number of tests that would occur at that time. Just a thought.
I haven't talked to the schools, but I don't know if you have any thoughts there, John. Back to school could be a whole nother round of this.
I think the, no pun intended, the school of thought here right now is, obviously I think facilities, companies, possibly the schools could attempt to require that the testing be done, similar to, businesses that were closed and then opened back up, and then maybe did a baseline test of their staff just to make sure if anyone was positive. Right now, obviously, if people are asymptomatic, then there's technically no reason for them to get tested per se. And even if they did get tested and potentially were positive, they're not going to have known that they were positive because they were asymptomatic. So, I think that the belief is still that, if you start to show symptoms that are COVID-like, you're supposed to still be reaching out to your physician, inquire about what's going on, and then they'll determine, hey, yeah, you better go ahead and go get a test, especially if it's something related to your work and employment, and then needing to be off isolated and quarantined at that point. I haven't seen anything in regards to, as we segue back into, the fall and schools, as to whether that can be required, whether you can make people actually take that test. And realistically, if you test a bunch of people and they're negative today, doesn't necessarily mean, that tomorrow or the next day that then they don't show up positive and still are asymptomatic. So it is kind of an either or sort of a thing, that there's not a good answer for that yet.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions for John? I appreciate it, John.
Thank you.
And just to mention to the group, as far as phase 4 goes and public health and 189, we are still going to be requiring masks and taking temperatures as people come in the building. Anita she had a meeting with our liability carrier, and she may have some information, but they were very happy to see that we were taking this seriously, and from a liability standpoint, we are protecting our employees in the public health interest by our policies here at the county building, along with taxpayer resources on those types of endeavors. So I appreciate it, John. Looks like we don't have anything under schools today for Dr. Murphy.
Andy,
Yes.
Andy, this is Kevin. Can I quickly make a correction for something I said earlier?
No, of course. Go ahead.
I misspoke because actually I thought about, you can't, as of now, and I don't think it'd be an easy thing, I don't believe you can have these same sessions at the sheriff's department, which is why we do the sheriff's in our building. The infrastructure to do the Zoom part of the meeting is extensive, and they don't have that. And I believe I led this committee to believe that you could go out there and do that. And I don't believe you can, so really this is the only location, given the Zoom part of the situation, that you can do. So I misspoke. I want to make sure I didn't set people down a road that I shouldn't have said that.
Okay. Thank you for that. And we'll talk offline with you, me, and Wes and try to figure out what type of solution may work. Because if phase 4 is like indefinite until there's a cure or a vaccine, and there's no cure or vaccine for the common cold or the regular flu. So I don't know what that looks like a year from now, to be honest, based on the current regulations. So we should at least see what we're up against financially if we had to make that happen. You know what I mean? We should know.
Makes sense what you said. I just spoke on behalf of the sheriff's department, and I was like, wait a minute. They don't have our same infrastructure. I shouldn't have made that comment.
I got you. Appreciate it. So nothing from schools today. VAC just resumed. Looks like meetings. They will have reports for next month. They're on a bi-monthly meeting schedule, I believe. I got a little note here. So we should get some next month. County Administrators Report. Anita Speckman, you have the staffing report?
I do, and does everybody have the staffing report in front of them? You can see there was kind of our usual run rate for terminations and new hires. I'll say over the last few months, we've seen I've seen more activity in terms of retirement. So I think through this whole thing, maybe our employees are reassessing their life choices. So we are seeing more retirements. I had one last month, one this month, one the month before. So and I've got another one, we've got notification that's coming up next month. So that's kind of a high rate for us. We usually only see a couple a year. So we're through this seeing one a month. There were 2 departments that hired temporary employees that are reflected in there. They're both full-time employees. The highway department, they're full-time, but those are their summer help. They're flaggers to be able to do their summer projects. So they're just here through the 1st of August or so, usually first week they go home. They're both rehires. They've worked for us in previous summers. So they held off as long as they could, but then brought them on in June so that they can complete their highway projects according to schedule. Maintenance hired 2 full-time but temporary employees. We did coordinate that. I think Andy talked about that last month with the union. Since they're non-union employees, they are temporary. They are located in the courthouse. They are specific to do COVID-related cleaning, like in between court calls, et cetera, that there's additional cleaning that needs to be done, and that's what those employees are for. So once we're through this process, those positions would be eliminated as well. So those are 4 positions. The rest of them are just standard, either the retirement or resignations. So if you take those 2 out, we're at 552. You can see year over year, there's about a 20-person increase. So I just want to remind the committee that we had 6 additional CanCom employees that came from Bradley. the AmeriCorps employees for the state's attorney that are grant funded. That's 9 of those. Probation had additional 4 that are grant funded, state reimbursed. And circuit clerk currently has 3. They were at about 5, but those were increased through the budgeting process. So that's kind of your difference year over year. Anyone have any questions about staffing? Okay. As Andy mentioned, I did have a meeting yesterday with my contact, our account manager at our work comp liability carrier. We talked a little bit about what the screening was that we're doing here. He had really positive impact in terms of what he saw here in terms of temping. He said this is actually the only building he's been in where we actually temp anyone coming into the building. And just so the committee's aware, that includes our employees as well as the general public. We're not getting a lot of pushback. We had a citizen come up that disagreed with where we're temping. We had a citizen come up and thought we should put more signage down at the bottom of the ramp so they didn't have to walk to the top of the ramp to realize they had to go to the front of the building. But really minor, not a lot of pushback from the citizens at large that are coming into the building. So that's good. We do have a corrections officer, one that's, there's a routine, there's about 3 of them that rotate through that are doing the screening. They're in need of that person back out at corrections, so we'll be posting for several part-time people to rotate through and take that at a minimum wage, just because we don't know how long this will continue. As a reminder, phase 4 does indicate for offices and all industries a continuation of health screenings. So if you have a small office, a health screening could be, a conversation with your employees about how they're feeling or any symptoms. But when we have the general public coming in, it's a little more difficult to try to do that. And so our health screening is the temperature. Then let's see, this afternoon we have our about annual, the last time we did this was last August. We have a claims review with all our legal representation, both as it relates to property and liability claims, as well as work comp. In terms of work comp, the feedback I got yesterday was they couldn't believe we have actually 5 open cases that we're going to be discussing, which, given the size of our workforce and the nature of our law enforcement, and as big a contingent as they are for our employment group, that is extremely low. So the number of cases, but the 5 cases are the ones that make these are serious long-term cases. So those will be discussed in terms of what's happening, in terms of limiting exposure, what the county's approach is, etc. So we'll have that this afternoon, and then liability, all liability claims. So we'll go through any open cases we have there. Any questions?
Just for the committee to know that the work that Chief Kalawenzu and the sheriff and Anita have done as a team with our liability carrier to help increase training, awareness, proper, the sheriff's department has the proper support from administration and vice versa. This just doesn't happen where we reduce. I think at one point we were on average of, Todd, you may remember, and some of the other members, 25, 30 of these ongoing at any given time. I mean, it was and then they were always filing new. So I mean, we're limiting our exposure. Our best practices, the sheriff's department's always done very well at that. But our cooperation and coordination has been very well, and I thank Anita for that, as well as the sheriff and Chief Kalawenzu.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss if we have to mention Nancy in there too from the state's attorney's office. Literally every day we're having conversations about how to approach these cases and what we do. So
Any questions, comments from the group?
No, Andy, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what you said, and for the committee to realize that that's a lot of time for Anita in her office of what she's doing, dealing with these types of events that, you know, thank you, Anita, for all your time you're putting in for this, but it is a bulk of her time during the day she deals with these things, so.
Well,
That's
and
my
the committee needs to realize that every one of those cases is a deductible hit.
Yes.
You know, so when you don't have as many, you know, the time we're spending on it, there is a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, so to speak. So it's not only the right thing to do, it's the economical thing to do as well. So, anyone else? Okay, thanks, Anita. Administrative issues. We have some appointments and reappointments. I'll read them together and we'll get a motion to combine and approve. Appointment of Craig Long, the Kankakee County GIS Committee, that's the board member spot. Reappointment of Dwayne Hull to the Otto Township Fire Protection District, and reappointment of Paul A. Mao to the Cabry Area Fire Protection District. Do we have a motion there?
Lear, so move.
Mr. Lear?
Second.
Yes.
Second from Mrs. Haas, I believe? Okay.
Yes.
I guess, any comments? I don't know about this long guy. No, I'm just kidding. We'll have to do a roll call. I almost forgot.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Byrne,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Aye.
Ms. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Searay,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Alrighty, I have some openings I'll announce real quick. Let's see, one opening, Mantino number 9 Drainage District, 3 on the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission, 1 opening on the ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals, 5 openings on the Kankakee County Board of Health, 1 opening on the Farmland Review Assessment Committee, 1 opening on the Kankakee River Valley Forest Preserve District Board, as well as 1 opening on all of the following: University of Illinois Extension, Essex Township Fire Protection District, Kankakee Township Fire Protection District, Pilot Township Fire Protection District, and St. Anne Fire Protection District. Alrighty, now moving on under new business, we have a resolution in front of you for the selection of election judges. Is there a motion to waive the reading and approve?
So moved.
Mr. Featherling, a second on that?
Ken.
Mr. Byrne?
Second.
Now, Dan is here to answer any questions, if anyone has any on this particular resolution.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
are we going to have the same number of polling places, or have we changed polling places?
Dan, you're 16, right? Is that the number?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
At this point, assuming that we have adequate staffing for all of our polling places, we're not planning on closing any of them.
Good.
Any other questions on this for Dan? All right. So I guess hearing no questions, we have a motion and a second. We could roll call vote that, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Byrne,
Aye.
Ms. Weber, Mr. Payton, Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Aye.
Ms. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Searay,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Alrighty, and then the next one, it's the amending of the holidays to be observed by the offices of Kankakee County for the calendar year 2020. We had an amendment, I believe it was the Election Day holiday that was added by the judges. So I'd need a motion on that to accept.
So move.
Mr. Payton, and a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Ciro. Alrighty, I guess we need a roll call on that one as well.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mr. Byrne,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Aye.
Ms. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Searoy,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Alrighty, any new, old, other business from the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Kinzinger.
does anybody have an update on Mr. Washington?
I have none, sir. I haven't heard from anybody. And
Okay, thank you.
I don't have anybody to call either, because, yeah. I publicly, I don't want to say about personal health stuff, so, but I don't have anything, I apologize.
Andy,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Polk?
I'll call you and talk to you later about that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Alrighty, I guess we need a motion. Without Mr. Hess, I really don't know what to do now. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Miller makes the motion.
Who was that, Mr. Miller? Was that Robotron? Who's that?
That was Battlestar Galactica.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Mr. Byrne. So it was well with Mr. Miller and Mr. Byrne with a second. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Have a great day. Take care.
See ya.